Hello, so I tried to make a video earlier and it didn't work because my mind wasn't working properly, and yeah, it probably still isn't actually, it's pretty late. But I tried to make a revision video on liberation theology, even though I've already got like 4 on my channel. But I made those ones a while ago, and I thought I'll just try and pluck information from the top of my head and see how it goes, but it didn't feel like it went very well. So after making a video and trying to talk about it for ages and getting pretty frustrated and having a cloudy mind, I basically decided to stop doing that, and I made some flashcards. So yeah, they should come in handy. I'm really tired, so I'm gonna go to bed soon. Don't even know what I'm gonna make a video about. I watched this guy this morning on YouTube called Vox someone, and he's known as like the Dark Lord or something like that. And it's like, one of my Facebook friends had sent a message to me saying, hey, watch this guy, because he like critiques Jordan Peterson. But I don't know if I really bought it. Like, the first video I watched of him, he's like, look, I've never watched a Jordan Peterson lecture, never watched any of his videos, I haven't read his books, and he's not familiar with the guy, but he was coming to all of these conclusions about him. And it's like, okay, like, I don't know, I just didn't buy it. He said that Jordan Peterson is a mentally ill lunatic who wrote a book, 12 Rules for Life, to console his own emasculinity, because he's supposedly a gamma male or something like that. So he wrote this whole book just to satisfy his own ego and to give himself validation. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that's part of it. I think human nature is pretty messed up, and we do things partially for our own self-interest, but I also think that we're more complex than that. I don't think there's necessarily just one reason for doing things. Like, that could be a latent function of writing the book. Like, he writes a book, it sells extremely well, it does boost his ego, obviously, but I can't see that being the sole purpose for writing a book in the first place. I think, yeah, I haven't actually read his book yet, but I'm familiar with the rules, and I've listened to him talk about it in lectures and stuff. And yeah, but I don't have the book. I listened to his first book, Maps of Meaning, on a YouTube audiobook thing. So that was actually quite interesting. I listened to that in December. I don't think I understood most of it, but I've listened to a lot of lectures since, and I feel like I get a little bit more of an understanding of what he's actually getting at in the book Maps of Meaning. But it is a complicated book and with complicated ideas, and unfortunately my mind can't always comprehend such to such an extent, which is necessary in order to be able to understand what he's writing. Maybe that makes his writing good, really good, so that it's obviously intended for people with higher IQs than me or other people. Yeah, but well, maybe it's just complicated because it doesn't make sense. But I think probably the former. I also had a little bit of a weird feeling that they're like, I guess, falling into some sort of relativism, like feeling like there is no truth, like there's all these different views on the world, and it's so easy to attach yourself to these views. And I'm thinking mostly about politics here, because there's two sides, which obviously split up into subcategories, but we'll call it right and left. It's like, I listen to the right, and it's like, well, they've got a case to make, their points are logical, they view reality in a certain way, and it seems to make sense to a certain degree. And then I look at the left, and they're viewing reality in a certain way, but in a different way. It's like that we're all looking at the same picture but through a different lens, and both of those lenses seem right. It's just perspective. But I don't want to just reduce the world down to perspective, even though that essentially is what it is, because we can't escape from our own perception. That's all we can experience, and we can shape our perspective perhaps with objective facts, but then that's assuming that the world is just made up of objective facts. And is that the case? Because I don't think that is the case. I think it goes deeper than that. Like, not only are we experiencing facts, but we're also experiencing an interpretation of the facts. But those facts still have an impact on us. Like if we're exposed to a fact and it's blatantly obvious that this fact is irrefutable, or at least irrefutable at this point in time, then we should be willing to let go of a current belief that that fact conflicts with, if that fact is stronger than the foundation which is supporting our current beliefs. But then it's like, how do we know that the fact is certain? Well, I guess this could lead to a sort of scientific imperialism, where what science is obviously able to produce the most certain facts. I say most certain because it's not like absolute certainty, but it's more certain than other sorts of facts which are derived from perhaps interpretivism, from language which is more ambiguous. But with science you can perform tests and you can attempt to falsify certain theories and ideas. And if you see some sort of logical, or if you see some sort of coherency within the results of these tests across multiple different tests, and they all seem to point to the same answer, then you can probably derive the conclusion that it's true, whatever it is that you be observing. Science also, though, relies on induction, and David Hume posed the problem of induction, which is essentially that it relies on a small amount of faith that what has always happened in the past is what will always happen in the future, or will carry on to happen. For example, we can induce that the sun is going to rise tomorrow, or we can deduce that the sun is going to rise tomorrow based on what has happened in the past. The sun has always risen the day after the night. But we have no way of knowing whether that's actually always going to happen. Like, something could go seriously wrong in the universe, which is highly unlikely, but it could happen whereby perhaps the sun explodes, or just we all die. Something wipes out the whole of humanity. And if something wipes out the whole of humanity, then does the sun even really rise? Because for it to rise, that would require some sort of observing agent there to witness it rising. But so, if there's no agent, does the sun actually rise? Or it's hard to say that it does. If there's no one on the planet, then the whole concept of rising is abolished, because what is rising a human construct, or does rising occur outside of the limits of the human experience? And things obviously rise. We see things rise. We might be able to experience things rise. But then again, we can't experience the noumenal sense of rising. We can only experience the phenomena, that which we experience. But I don't doubt that things rise, like the sun. Like, I feel like if all humans disappeared, then the sun would still rise, but just it would be in a different way. It's in a way that we can't quite comprehend or imagine, but it'll still happen. I'm trying to comprehend it, but I don't think, I just think it's impossible to be able to do that. Because you can't imagine something happening with no agent there to witness it, because then you'd be there to witness it happening, even if that's within the confines of your thought experiment, within your mind. Like, imagine a planet, okay, with nobody on it, and then try to imagine a sun rising. See, I can see that happening, but I have to be there in order to witness it rise. Otherwise, is it rising? And I don't know. Maybe this is just a pointless endeavour that I'm going on right now, but, you know. Oh well. So, is there truth? So, I've sort of established that scientific truth is almost absolute. But then, when it comes to science, isn't the only aspect to the world. It's not the only aspect to our experience. There's other aspects to our experience which we experience on a daily basis, and perhaps more so than science. It's like scientific facts. It's like, yeah, but they're not necessarily relevant to everyday life. It tells us the makeup of the universe, and it can be an awe-inspiring thing, and it can be extremely eye-opening and make us think and wonder about what's really out there. But it's not very pragmatic, I guess. Like, you don't need to know that there's gravity, which keeps us grounded on Earth. Necessarily, you don't need to know that, because whether you know that or not, the gravity is still going to keep us grounded on Earth. It's still going to fulfill its purpose, because it's not subject to the human experience. The laws of physics aren't subject to the human experience, or so it seems. The laws of physics seem to be occurring outside of ourselves within the universe of which we inhabit. But it seems to be the subjective reality which is much more ambiguous, but it's also the one in which we experience the most. And not just our own subjective experience, but other people's subjective experience, which seems to have an influence on our subjective experience. And I guess we call other people's subjective experience the objective experience, but that wouldn't necessarily be the objective experience. The objective experience could be interpreted in multiple different ways, and I think this is something that Kant explored. So the subjective experience could be, the objective experience could be that which multiple people experience. So if something is objective, it could be like a well established belief system or a paradigm or something like that. Something that multiple people believe. I don't know if I've quite worded that correctly. And then you could use objective experience as in you're observing something and you sort of take a step back from your own judgment. You sort of try to leave behind your own subjective narratives and you distance yourself from something in order to be able to look at it objectively or look at it from an outsider's perspective. And I guess we could say that this happens in a courtroom. It's like the judge, they sort of have to leave their moral values aside so that they can align themselves with the law. They have to do what the law says. They can't just say, right, I think you've been really bad, I'm going to give you this sentence. Maybe they could, but that would put them above the law. But they've got to work within the confines of the law. They can't just do what they feel like doing based on their own subjective experience. So they're stepping outside of that, taking an objective view on things. But perhaps a judge example isn't such a good example, because the judge is then relying on written rules. So it makes it almost easier to be objective, because you've got the objectivity laid out in front of you or in your mind, depending on if you know the rules which are written down on as legislation. I guess another objective stance you could take, which is maybe a little bit more applicable to daily life, is say if your friends have an argument and it's like, well, maybe you will try to be the mediator. You'll take the perspective of one person and take the perspective of another, but not necessarily take sides, just see what each of them has to say. See, because when you take sides, that's when you let your subjective experience interfere. You let your emotions play a part. I still haven't got to what I want to get to, which is there truth? I think that's what this is all about. This is what I've been thinking about all day. It's also made me feel a great deal of uncertainty. And it's also made me feel like, I don't know, I sort of notice it coming and going, but it's like when I'm revising or when I'm wanting to write an essay or talk about something, it's like I struggle to do it, because it's like, well, what if I'm wrong? And then the possibility of me being wrong is extremely high, because there's always going to be someone else who disagrees, like with the politics. We're looking at two sides of the same story, of the same event. For example, if I take poverty, it's like, you've got the left wing, it's like, well, they're going to look at the people in poverty with compassion and kindness, and they're going to want to help them. Whereas people on the far right, or maybe not far right, but people on the right, including the far right, are going to look at them perhaps with a little bit of resentment, like hatred. It's like thinking that they're a burden on the economy and on society, and that they're just living on benefits. So it's looking at the same event but with a different eye. And it's like, I don't think I'm worried about being wrong. I think I'm just worried about there not being a right. It's like, how am I possibly supposed to choose what viewpoint I want to take? Which side do I want to be on? And maybe that's when I should let my emotions come into play. But I feel like if I let my emotions come into play, I don't know, I just don't have many opinions on things. Like, sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm able to have opinions on things. But I feel like those opinions are influenced by other people. It's like I'll go on the internet a little bit, read some things, I might watch some YouTube videos, I'll get a bit attached, I'll formulate an opinion, and then I'll maybe go on social media and discuss that opinion with people. Because I'm in like a political debate group thingy, and it's a bit shit sometimes, but yeah. But I just don't know what to believe. One belief I do have, and even this I don't stand up for enough, probably. Just, I don't know why, but I believe that I'm a vegan, so I believe it's wrong to eat meat, and it's wrong to kill animals, and it's wrong to, I don't know. Well, I just feel like it's supporting the factory farming industry, and I perceive that to be a reprehensible industry. And the reason I perceive it to be a reprehensible industry is because I've seen videos of it, and I've watched a lot of debates, and I've heard the arguments for both sides, and I feel like it's just more logical to be on the side that I'm on. I feel like I've educated myself on it. And I feel like if other people educated themselves on it, they should logically come to the same conclusion as me. Because I actually feel like I'm right in this case. Like, it's hard to justify the way that animals are treated in those conditions. And I think you could make an argument, like if you're living out in the wild and you're playing a sort of hunter-gatherer game, then you could use the argument that eating meat is natural, therefore you can go out and do it. And I was like, yeah. But when you use that same argument as of, oh well, it's natural to eat animal products, when your meat is being reared by the millions in factories, it's like, no, that's not natural. The animals are being injected with antibiotics and all of these different chemicals, and they're being fattened up and treated in absolutely horrible ways and kept in small places to the point where they're probably extremely depressed and physically and mentally suffering. It's like, no, that's not natural. See, I can establish some truth. And maybe it's the process that I can establish truth is what I should be standing up for. Instead of going out and trying to learn about other things and establish truth there. Although I think I should be going out and learning about other things, but if I go out and learn about other things and I listen to both sides of the story and I still can't make up my mind, then perhaps that's when I should leave it. I think some things it's easier to make moral decisions on than others. Like when you can obviously see suffering occurring and that suffering is obviously not necessary, then why partake in it? Why allow it to go on? And I think you could make an argument for homelessness or poverty. It's like that makes people suffer. But other arguments I've heard for that is, it's like, well, yeah, that's bad. No one's going to say that poverty is good. Maybe some people might if they're a little bit fucked up, but I guess it's what causes that poverty. It's like an animal. I see an animal as innocent. They don't have a voice. They can't stand up for themselves. But with people, it's different. I feel like people have the power to be able to pull themselves out of a situation. But obviously that's a general statement because I don't think everyone does have the ability to do that. Like some people just could be disadvantaged disproportionately compared to the rest of society, and obviously that's through no fault of their own. But I think we can all make the best of our situation, and it's easy for me to say that because, like, I haven't necessarily got a hard life. I've got a bed to sleep in at night, got a roof over my head. Not everyone does have that, and that's not a good thing. But what do we do about it? So I've established another truth: homelessness is bad. So I can believe that. It's just the question is then what to do about it. But I feel like that's out of my hands. Like I can't go and fix a homeless person. I can't. That's completely out of my domain of competence. And I can't fix poverty. Like I don't think it's right that people live in poverty. But the reasons why they live in poverty matters. And the reasons why they live in poverty matters in a way that's going to affect how we treat the poverty. Because if the reason that someone's in poverty, which this can be the case, is because this person is addicted to drugs, then we first need to tackle the drug addiction, which is before we actually tackle the poverty. Because you don't want to give a drug addict money. You don't want to give them spare money because what do you think someone who's addicted to heroin is going to spend that extra money on? They're obviously going to spend it on drugs. So what we have to do is perhaps put more money into systems into rehabilitation systems, which can help people get off drugs. And perhaps we have to change the attitude we have as a society towards drugs and towards drug addicts. And I know that in places like Portugal, they've actually decriminalised all drugs, and it's led to a decline in overdoses on things like heroin, because people feel more able to actually speak out and say, look, I've got a problem, need help. Whereas in places like the UK and the US, where there's extreme stigma around drug use, and also not just social stigma but legal implications, whereby you could end up in prison for using and selling or abusing drugs. So I think that's something that we should definitely consider, but there is a large opposition to it, because everyone's like, well, if you decriminalise drugs, then everyone will go around using heroin. Like, no, that's not the case. Cigarettes are legal. Not everyone goes around using them. And yes, there is a large proportion of the country who do use them, and they are aware of the health risks, but they choose to do it anyway. But, you know, it's hard to say. It's a problem that needs to be tackled, and people need to start thinking up solutions fast, because it leads to other problems, which then also need to be tackled. But you can't tackle those problems, like the poverty, until you've tackled the problems which are leading to the poverty, which is the drug addiction. And perhaps even before that, what's leading to the drug addiction? Maybe it's pure socialisation, and then we've got to look at the institution of the family. See, the way I'm talking right now, I think I'm probably more left-wing than right-wing. Maybe I don't have to put a label on it, but that's the way I'm talking. Because I know that on the right, if you're more likely to be harsher punishments, whereas on the left, I can actually look at left and right realism, which I've got on my wall there for sociology revision. Right realists are tough on crime, left realists are tough on the causes of crime. And I think I agree with left realists in this case. I think we should be more tough on the causes of crime in order to prevent crime in the first place, rather than just allowing crime to happen and punishing people harshly for it, which actually doesn't work. Michel Foucault he found out that the best deterrent for criminal behaviour is not having harsher sentences. It didn't do anything. Like, you could bring in the death penalty and it won't actually change the amount of crime that happens. And you could, I don't know, raise the fines. Like, say, instead of getting £20 for a fine ticket, for a speeding ticket, you could get like 500. That wouldn't necessarily do anything. But the most effective method is surveillance. So yeah, watch. When people feel like they're being watched, they're less likely to do something bad because they don't want to get caught. Whereas, so I think I'm probably more with left realism, which is left wing essentially. But I don't think I'm far left. I'd say if anything, I'm like centre left. But then again, that's just from this aspect of crime. I don't know where I really sit for the rest of it. So I feel like I've established some truth, which is good. I feel like I've thought through some things, which is also good. Because I'm not just getting my truth from other people right now, I'm actually thinking things through myself. And maybe I've been influenced from other people in the past, like with that left and right realist poster. Those are actually things which are in the world. And it's okay to be influenced by things which are in the world, because I am in the world. I don't want to be influenced by things that are not in the world, even though that would be pretty cool, to be honest. Some aliens come down and start telling me what to believe. It's like, yeah, I'm going to believe those aliens. They're probably more intelligent than the majority of people on Earth. So there is truth, but there isn't one truth. There is a subjective overlay which is necessary and we can't escape from. And it's like, yes, there's always going to be people who disagree with your view, and yes, you might be wrong. But if you think something through and you come to a conclusion, then trust that. If you know that you've put in the thought and the logical... well, this is going to cut out in like a minute, so I'll end it off here. But yeah, think things through for yourself, come to your own conclusions. Look at external sources, but don't let that be the be-all and end-all. Make sure it's your own decision. And, okay, that's about it anyway. There's a little bit of truth. Right, thanks for watching.